So on to the star attraction of the afternoon. It's my privilege to introduce today's keynote speaker, David Hall, managing partner at Revolution's Rise of the Rest Seed Fund. David's firm, Revolution Partners, played a key role inspiring many of us to focus on investing in secondary markets. He and his partners have played a key role in letting the world know how special secondary markets outside of Silicon Valley are, not only in terms of generating great returns, creating lots of jobs, but helping to rebuild our country and communities that are vital to our country's health and prosperity. David began his career with Revolution in 2006, serving as an investment professional across the firm, including both Revolution Growth and Revolution Ventures. He's now responsible for investment sourcing, execution, and oversight of all of the portfolio companies across the Rise of the Rest Fund. He's worked with numerous portfolio companies, including Revolution Money, which was acquired by American Express, Booker, which was acquired by MindBody, BenchPrep, FreightWaves, Foxtrot, and Understory. He also has a connection to this region. Revolution backed SparkCharge, which got a start in Syracuse University's Blackstone Launchpad and was a participant in the Tech Garden programming. Before Revolution, David was an executive with the Washington Post Company, where he managed corporate M&A investments. Earlier in his career, he held positions at Akamai and Morgan Stanley. He received a BA in economics from Morehouse and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Today, we're really excited to hear his take on the idea that great companies can start anywhere and why communities like Syracuse and Central New York are fertile ground for capturing those opportunities for entrepreneurial growth. So please join me in a warm welcome for David Hall.
Thank you so much, Samak. It was a really, really generous introduction. I need to have you come with me on the other 30 cities or so I visit every year. It is such an honor to be with you all today here in Syracuse at the CenterState CEO annual meeting. I am really honored and just want to start with a big shout out of appreciation to Rob and Elle and the team. They have done a phenomenal job. I feel like I have just arrived and I'm king for the day. I've been touring all sorts of amazing entrepreneurial hotspots around town. I had lunch in an amazing food hall. I told Elle I have to make sure I don't get anything on my shirt, so we have to eat something clean. And so it's just been a wonderful day touring your community and seeing all of the entrepreneurial development that's happened. It's so great to hear that our friends from Micron also saw this and have voted for the long haul to build here and be entrepreneurs inside of the community. I also want to start by saying that the authenticity through which CenterState CEO has been leading, I see a lot of economic development authorities, and these guys have gotten it right. You are so lucky to have Rob and his team building here and helping to connect the dots across the community. So hats off to the CenterState CEO team. And also, I also want to just give a big shout out to the businesses of the year. It is hard operating today. It is hard operating small businesses, large businesses. And for these businesses to have endured a pandemic and all sorts of craziness over the last couple of years, hats off to them on what they've been able to accomplish. I'm going to talk today for just a few minutes, give you a little bit of update on who I am, tell you a little bit about what we've seen on the road as the Rise of the Rest invests in markets outside of Silicon Valley, New York City, and Boston. So it's a big country outside of those three markets. But a lot of my coastal competitors, other venture capitalists, don't see that and don't feel that. And one of the unique things is we've been able to see and find and invest in entrepreneurs that are changing the world from places like Moorhead, Kentucky, Tampa, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona, and even a couple in upstate and central New York. I'll also tell you a little bit about what I've seen and how you can best support these entrepreneurial ecosystems. But first, I want to start with my story. Samak did an amazing job, again, telling a little bit of my history. But I was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I start there because Baton Rouge was a town when I was growing up, my parents, my family members, my teachers, they all said, you have to move away. If you want a job, a good job, and you want to do well, you need to move away. And I'm just curious, by a show of hands, who either heard that or told that to their kids about this area? You need to move away. You're going to need to move away if you want to get a good job. And I'm so fortunate that today, in places like Baton Rouge, in places like Syracuse, in places like Central New York, there is so much more optimism. And I feel like we're on our way, and we're on our way. So I left Louisiana. I went and worked. I went to Morehouse College. It's a HBCU, historically black college and university based in Atlanta, Georgia. I'll tell you a little bit later the lessons on diversity I learned at a school that is 90% African American and 100% men. It's phenomenal. I graduated. I've been told that I used to always say that that was the best decision that I made in my life. And then I got married 13 years ago, and now my wife says, that was the second best decision you made, buddy. The best decision you made was 13 years ago. I left Morehouse, and I went to work on Wall Street at Morgan Stanley, and it was such an incredible experience for me. It was the first place where I learned that business could be an agent for change, that companies working together can actually move the needle on societal problems. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me because I previously thought that this was only the lane for policymakers, but seeing how business can step in and change things, change communities, was amazing. I then left to go to Akamai Technologies. It's a technology company based in Boston. I learned that to invest in myself and what was next. I put all of this in the lab at Harvard Business School, left and joined the Washington Post, which is a venerable media company. I was one day reading in the paper about this guy named Steve Case, who had this audacious idea that investing in and building companies outside of the core tech hubs could yield amazing results, amazing returns, and help build and lift communities. And this is like Steve Case, AOL, like this is a visionary leader, and people were like, Steve, are you crazy? Innovation is centric in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, for God's sake. And he said, trust me, over time, this will be the case. The rising cities will continue to rise and will innovate, and the best minds changing and affecting the biggest industries won't be based in Silicon Valley. They'll be based in rising cities across the country. And you know what? We were right. On this graph, and I apologize for the size, what you can see in the maroon and the blue graph is the share of venture capital dollars going to Silicon Valley-based companies. And you can see that 10-year trajectory is going down, which means that more and more investors are agreeing with us. They are finding value outside of the coasts. This number has come back a little bit since the pandemic, but we think that the long-term trajectory is here to stay, that there are great opportunities outside of the coast, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Our firm has also published a couple of really interesting thought leadership reports, one of which is a report that we did in conjunction with PitchBook called Beyond Silicon Valley that talks about how the data behind this change. Steve also wrote a book called Rise of the Rest, which, great marketing. It also really helps to drive in the stories of these entrepreneurs, the ecosystems from which they are building their companies, and all of the community members that support them. So our fund, we are a venture capital firm. We invest capital. We have $300 million under management, and we've invested it in almost 200 companies. Those companies are in 37 states in the US and DC, and we just closed on our second investment in Puerto Rico. So we were really able to find value all across the US. Out of those companies, about half dozen of them have crossed into unicorn status, which means that their valuation is over $1 billion. It's one of those big markers of demarcation for venture capitalists that the companies are succeeding. The things I'm most proud of are on the bottom, however. Over 90% of our companies are operating and are currently operating. In venture, as you've heard, most of it's a bloodbath. Half of venture capital businesses go out of business. Our companies are still operating. One of the reasons I do believe is because they're operating in main streets across the USA and not trying to compete in Midtown Manhattan or the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. These companies have raised nearly $8 billion in follow-on venture capital from some of the best, most well-known and well-regarded venture capitalists in America. I'm super excited about that. And then finally, 40% of our companies are founded by a woman or a person of color or both. This is something I'm really proud of, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about it, but the ability to see diversity in place has enhanced our ability to see diversity in founder. So you talk to somebody from Rise of the Rest, you're going to see a lot of maps. So just beware, there are going to be a lot of maps in this deck. These are the places where we've invested in blue and then how they're regionally distributed across the country. We're pretty evenly distributed. We have some work to do in the Southeast. So next week I'll be in Chattanooga, and later next month I'll be in Tampa. But suffice it to say, the reason why I put this slide on the screen is twofold. One, if you know anybody starting a company in the Dakotas or West Virginia, let me know, because we're trying to fill out our map. But more importantly, if this were just states where most venture capital goes, it would be a really empty map. 75% of all venture capital goes to only 3 states: California, New York, and Massachusetts. And now, while we are sitting in the great state of New York, you and I both know that the lion's share of that money isn't coming to this community, but coming down to New York City. We think that it's time for there to be a difference. We think that there's time for there to be a change. And we think that this opportunity to invest in some of these cities is really starting to accelerate. And we recognize that we all have some work to do to continue along this road. One of the things I love to talk about is we are investing in the industries of the future. Now, most people look at venture capitalists and they say, oh, well, a 19-year-old Stanford grad, well, the things that they're investing in ways to get to the airport. They're investing in ways to get their laundry clean. They're investing in ways to get their burrito delivered to them. They're investing in ways to find a date. They're solving the issues right in front of their nose. We're choosing to invest in companies that are also solving the issues in front of their nose. But those are industries like financial services. Those are industries like vertical software. Those are industries that are changing and evolving, like climate and sustainability. And those are industries that have been unpacked by things like the pandemic and logistics and supply chain. And I want to give a shout out to just a couple of our companies. The first is Kangaroo Time, based in Buffalo, Buffalo-based Kangaroo Time. Kangaroo Time is a digital software platform for daycare centers. Again, another one of these care economy centers where putting parents and daycare teachers on the same communication platform drives a lot of value for the centers. And then also ShearShare in the third column at the bottom. ShearShare was founded by an African-American husband and wife team out of Dallas, Texas, who moved and relocated their company to Buffalo. So the folks from Collins should check them out. They are called, their tagline is Hairbnb. They allow stylists to rent space in other salons so that they can sort of go like Airbnb style to different salons and rent space by the day. This bubble chart proves that our thesis is working. We are finding opportunity to get our 200 companies graduated well beyond just the seed stage, and they're finding follow-on financings in Series A's, Series B's, and beyond. And I'm really thrilled to see that we always joke in our office that our job is to get our companies into the best colleges that we can, and they're getting into some good colleges. But really what I wanted to talk to you guys about today is something that we talked about and have anchored a lot of our investment thesis around, and it's this concept of tentpole companies. I'll just read it. A tentpole company is a company that, because of its standout success, attracts investment, talent, and attention to its host city's broader startup community. We really recognize the importance of startups to be tentpole companies. They hold up the ecosystem and stand out as a real testament for what's possible for tech entrepreneurs, for young entrepreneurs, for new American entrepreneurs to stand up and innovate some of the older and more incumbent industries. We all know, and it's very famous, the story of what Ford did to Detroit. And it was the company that really put American manufacturing on the map. Ford was the tentpole that held up a lot of the automotive industry in the US, but specifically in Detroit. Seattle was a sleepy aircraft manufacturing town until Bill Gates and his team really infused the next generation of technology into Seattle, building Microsoft, and was actually one of the big sort of reasons why Jeff Bezos chose to start and launch Amazon in Seattle, because he knew that there was that strong tech talent, that the tentpole of Microsoft was such an attractive draw to people like Jeff Bezos and bringing Amazon to Seattle as well. So these tentpoles have a lot of virtuous circles. We've invested in a couple of tentpoles, Freightwaves out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Foxtrot is a cool branded company out of Chicago. They're early, but they're growing, and they're attracting talent. They're attracting attention, and they do the four things at the bottom. They validate the city's entrepreneurial ecosystem. They become really standout examples of what's possible in a city. They represent to the world how startups can change little industries. Foxtrot is innovating at the intersection between convenience stores and grocery in a way that's neighborly and friendly and could fit in any one of the beautiful corner stores that I've seen here since I've been in Syracuse. They create wealth. We want them to be successful. Part of this game in investing in startups is you want success. Success begets success. We want them to generate phenomenal exits so that the fourth thing, and the most important thing, those successful exits can reinvest back into the community, really putting that flywheel in motion. This is an example, again, another map, but our companies we're selecting and we're finding have been able to rise to the top of their city's ecosystems. They've been able to become some of these really breakthrough tentpole companies. My goal and my challenge to all of you is let's put a dot on there for Central New York. I would love to find a deal that we can put on that dot onto this map that can be one of the next great companies that come from this region. Our fund is backed by some really iconic leaders. They really helped push this notion that the rise of the rest isn't a fad, but it actually is a thing. We've got investors like David Rubenstein and Ray Dalio from Bridgewater. We've got entrepreneurs like Jeff Bezos and Howard Schultz, Tory Burch. We've got venture capitalists even who saw value in the work that we're doing outside of their networks in Silicon Valley. People like John Doerr from Kleiner Perkins or Jim Breyer from Excel. So we're really pleased that these folks have joined us in our effort to build the next generation venture capital fund. And our fund really does sit at the nexus between the regional investors, even our friends at 43 North, with whom we're co-invested in both, Kangaroo Time and Spark Charge. But we also sit between those companies and some of the funds in Silicon Valley that really are the brand names for Silicon Valley funds. And as I said, when I was at Morehouse, so I was a freshman and I walked down in the dorms, and one of the things that, you see a school full of black men and you think, wow, there's no diversity here. My first night in the dorms, I walked down and I heard a lot of hip hop, I heard a lot of R&B, but I also heard classical, and I heard heavy metal, I heard country, I heard jazz. I started to see in one group of people, there are lots of different makeups of those people. There's lots of different diversity. We've been able to see a lot of different diversity, both in the businesses that we invest in and the people that we invest in, including, as Samak said, Josh Aviv from Spark Charge, a Syracuse University alum who now has a company, I can't tell you exactly what it's worth, but it's worth a lot of money, and we've been able to ride that success before he was on Shark Tank and before he's raised hundreds of millions of dollars. And so it's been a great success to see that type of business come out of this region. So my time is short here, and I wanted to wrap with just a couple of things that I've seen along the road and really think and underscore how top ecosystems thrive. The first, and I think this is the most important to understand, to create a startup, a thriving startup ecosystem, winners are made. They're not born. They need your support. They need everybody in this room to take up and pick up a startup, find one that you're going to help, and the help is really coming in 4 different categories. The first is you're going to help them recruit. And that doesn't just mean help them find somebody to be their CFO. That also might mean helping their wife or husband find a job in Syracuse so that they can stay here. That also means helping them find a house or find a good school to go to. The second thing you can do is you can finance these businesses. These businesses need money. They need early startup risk capital. Please invest in startups. It's a great way to start getting involved in the community. It's a great way to start finding out what's happening in your startup ecosystem. The third way is by patronizing them. You guys sit at some of the most amazing national brands in the country. Being a customer of a startup is more important often than equity financing or debt financing. And finally, supporting them. There's always something you can add, and these startups need so much. The second thing, diversity is good for business. Everybody always says that, and it's been cliched to death. But to me, I think the more important line is the opposite. Homogeneity is actually bad for business, and I mean that across the board. So if you're sitting in a room and it's all men, please don't make any decisions. There's half the population that's not represented in that room. But this also goes for, obviously, people of color. This obviously goes for increasingly a broader spectrum of age diversity. It shouldn't be all older people. It shouldn't be all young people, making sure that there's a diversity of thought in the room. And to the big businesses and to the corporate businesses in this room, I'd also say, if you're making a lot of decisions on the future of this region's economy and startups aren't represented, you need to open the door and add more chairs and not take away and close the door. You add that voice into the table. The third thing, YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. I will stop and say this community, from my time here, has been incredible at doing. It has been one of the most welcoming, arms wide open, come in, ask questions communities that I've visited, and I think you guys deserve to give yourselves a round of applause on that. One of the things I do when I visit cities is I love to walk them in the evening. And I walk around and I look and I see, who's out in the streets, who's having fun. I was staying downtown at the Courtyard, Armory Square, and I just walked around and it was so vibrant and so interesting and so diverse and so many people. But I could also tell that I probably wouldn't have wanted to walk up Salina Street at 10 o'clock at night 10 years ago. And so that's a credit to you guys and the work that you're doing to make this an inviting community, that you're connecting the right resources and the right people to reinvigorate the places that needed a little bit of help. And you're doing so with the authenticity and the appreciation for bringing everybody along to make sure that there are also resources for those that have the least among us, to make sure that they're also brought into this next generation of the economy. So this is one where I usually push cities and regions hard, but this is one where I think you guys have done a phenomenal job. And then the final thing is really encouraging tentpole companies that are going to stay there, stand up, and hold up the rest of the ecosystem versus the tadpole companies, those companies that develop lungs and then leave the pond. You really want to really invest in the companies that are going to stay here and that are going to build roots and for whom it's important for them because they need to be close to SU or they need to be close to some of the resources here for their business. Otherwise, you're going to start to see not just the brain drain, but the economic drain as your tadpoles leave the pond. So really invest in tentpoles. I've really enjoyed my time here. My time is up. I want to leave you with one big thing. I've been so overwhelmed by all the people that I visited and all of the businesses and opportunities that I visited while I'm here. And the thing that's always struck me is now is the time for this region to step on the gas. You have so much going for you. You're going so quickly in the right direction. And a lot of the tendency, particularly from the folks who've lived here and been here, is maybe to say, we're going too fast, I'm uncomfortable, let's take our foot off the gas and coast. I will tell you that's the first way that you stop the innovation. When innovation is happening and you've hit a node and you've gotten the imprimatur of a great company like Micron that says, I'm betting, I'm long on Syracuse, I'm long on Central New York. Now is the time to bear hug them, buckle them in, and step on the gas, because things are moving fast here. And I love to see how that acceleration starts to beget other acceleration. And then when somebody's moving here from Micron, they're going to bring their wife, and she's going to say, I've got an idea for the next great startup. And she's going to start that startup, and then you're going to have two great companies here. And that multiplier effect really starts to happen, but it doesn't happen without this community holding hands with the existing businesses, holding hands with the new businesses, holding hands with the startups that are going to really change the landscape. And it's my pleasure to come and spend a few minutes talking to you. Thank you so much. Congratulations.